In the village of Ekere, mirrors are banned due to an ancient curse, but when young Zuri finds a hidden mirror, her reflection reveals a dark, twisted version of herself. As Zuri faces her own shadow self, a reflection willing to do anything, even kill, she's thrust into a terrifying battle between light and darkness. With her courage and the wisdom of her ancestors, Zuri must confront the deepest fears lurking within her. Will she conquer the spirit that seeks to consume her, or will she be lost to the darkness forever? Watch to uncover the heart-pounding twist in this chilling African folktale. In the small village of Ekere there was a strange rule: no mirrors were allowed. It had been this way for many generations. The elders said that long ago, a terrible curse fell on the village because of mirrors, and since then, no one was allowed to own one. No one knew what the curse was exactly, but it was enough to keep everyone afraid. Zuri, an adventurous 12-year-old girl, was curious about this rule. Why were mirrors so dangerous? She had only heard stories, but never understood. One afternoon, while exploring the dusty old attic in her grandmother's house, Zuri stumbled upon something shiny. Pushing aside some old cloth, her heart skipped a beat. It was a small mirror, hidden for years. She held the mirror carefully, gazing at her reflection. She had never seen her face this clearly before. But as she stared, something strange happened. Her reflection smiled back at her, even though Zuri wasn't smiling. Zuri's hand trembled as she held the mirror. She blinked a few times, hoping she had imagined the strange smile. Her reflection seemed normal again. Maybe I'm just tired, she whispered to herself, though her heart was pounding. She quickly wrapped the mirror in cloth and stuffed it into her bag. She didn't want her grandmother to find out. Later that night, Zuri sneaked into her room and unwrapped the mirror again. This time, the reflection seemed different. It looked like her, but there was something darker about it. Her reflection's eyes were sharper, her smile too wide. Suddenly, the reflection spoke, "I can help you, Zuri. I can give you everything you desire." Zuri gasped, dropping the mirror in shock. How could her reflection speak? It was impossible. But the voice continued, even though the mirror was on the floor. "Don't be afraid. You want to be special, don't you? I can make you powerful. All you have to do is trust me." Zuri couldn't stop thinking about the voice. What did it mean? Did her reflection really have power? The next day, she picked up the mirror again, her curiosity too strong. "What do you want from me?" Zuri asked, her voice shaking. The reflection smiled. "I don't want anything bad. I just want to help you. People don't appreciate you, do they? You feel small, unnoticed. I can change that. I can make you the most important person in Ekere. All you have to do is let me in." Zuri's mind raced. She had always felt like she wasn't enough. Other kids in the village teased her for being curious and different. They called her strange because she loved to ask questions. But what if the reflection could make them respect her? The idea was tempting, but deep down, something didn't feel right. Still, she couldn't resist the pull. "Okay," she whispered, "what do I need to do?" The reflection's eyes gleamed. "Just trust me. I'll take care of everything." From that day, strange things started happening. Zuri noticed that people in the village began treating her differently. The kids who used to tease her now seemed a little nervous around her. When she spoke, people listened, even the adults. It felt good, but it also felt unnatural. One evening, Zuri was walking through the village when she accidentally bumped into Amora, a girl who had always been mean to her. Amora sneered and pushed Zuri aside. But before Zuri could react, her reflection's voice whispered in her ear, "You don't have to let her treat you like that. Push back." Without thinking, Zuri shoved Amora hard. Too hard. Amora fell into a puddle, and everyone gasped. Zuri hadn't meant to push her that way, but it was like her body moved on its own. Amora looked up at Zuri with wide eyes, clearly frightened. Zuri's heart pounded. What was happening to her? Zuri hurried home after the incident with Amora, her hands shaking. She could still hear the reflection's voice echoing in her head. You did well, Zuri. You're finally standing up for yourself. But Zuri wasn't so sure. The way Amora had looked at her, so scared, made her stomach churn. She didn't want to be feared. That wasn't the kind of person she wanted to become. When she got back to her room, she sat on her bed and stared at the mirror. I didn't want to hurt her, she whispered. The reflection smiled back, calm and unbothered. Sometimes, people need to be put in their place. They've been mean to you for so long. Don't you deserve to feel powerful for once? Zuri wasn't sure. She hadn't meant to push Amora so hard. But then again, Amora had always made her life difficult. Maybe her reflection was right. Maybe people did need to learn that she wasn't someone to be messed with anymore. Later that night, Zuri's grandmother, Nia, noticed something was off. Zuri, you've been quiet. Is something bothering you? She asked gently, her wise eyes scanning Zuri's face. Zuri wanted to tell her about the mirror. She wanted to ask about the curse and if it was true. But something stopped her. What would her grandmother say if she knew Zuri had the forbidden object? I'm fine, Grandma. Just tired, Zuri lied, forcing a smile. Nia narrowed her eyes. You know, Zuri, the village's rule about mirrors isn't just a silly old story. Mirrors have power. They can show us things we don't want to see, our deepest fears, our darkest desires. That's why they're dangerous. Zuri swallowed hard. Her grandmother's words sent chills down her spine. Did her grandmother know? Could she sense that something was wrong? Be careful with your heart, Zuri. Not everything that promises power is good for you, Nia warned before heading to bed. Zuri's heart raced after her grandmother's warning. She knew she should stop using the mirror, but the reflection's voice was already in her head. She doesn't understand you, Zuri. She's afraid of what you can become. But I'm not afraid. I know how special you are. Zuri glanced at the mirror. Her reflection looked stronger, more confident. What do you want from me? Zuri asked, her voice trembling. The reflection smile grew wider. You've tasted power, haven't you? I can give you more. You just have to trust me completely. Let me help you get what you want. All those people who've been holding you back. They'll have no choice but to respect you. Zuri hesitated. She wanted respect, but at what cost? What do I have to do? She asked softly. Start with little things, the reflection replied, its voice soothing and persuasive. Take control of your life. Don't let anyone push you around anymore. In the following days, Zuri noticed a change in herself. She began standing taller, speaking with more authority. The other kids stopped teasing her. Some even started to follow her around, wanting to be her friend. But it wasn't friendship Zuri felt from them, it was fear. Whenever someone challenged her, the reflection's voice whispered in her mind, telling her how to respond. And each time, Zuri's actions grew harsher. She didn't just stand up for herself anymore, she pushed others down to feel powerful. One afternoon, Zuri crossed paths with Kofi, a boy known for being kind. He asked her why she had been acting so differently lately. You're not the same Zuri I knew, he said softly. Zuri felt a pang of guilt, but the reflection quickly saw Zuri's face hardened. Maybe I'm not the same. Maybe I'm stronger now. Is that a problem, Kofi? She snapped. Kofi shook his head, disappointment in his eyes. Strength isn't about hurting others, Zuri. I hope you remember that before it's too late. Zuri's new confidence came with a price. She started to feel the weight of her choices. Each time she looked into the mirror, her reflection seemed darker, more twisted. It still looked like her, but the kind, curious Zuri she once knew was fading. In its place was a version of herself that was cold and unfeeling. One night, as she gazed into the mirror, her reflection spoke again. You've come so far, Zuri. But there's more you can have. More power, more respect. All you have to do is one last thing for me. Zuri frowned. What do you want me to do? The reflection's eyes glowed with a sinister light. There's someone standing in your way. Someone who knows too much. You must get rid of them. Zuri's heart skipped a beat. Get rid of them? What do you mean? You know who I'm talking about? Your grandmother. She's been warning you. She'll try to stop us. You must make sure she can't. Zuri felt sick. How could she even think of hurting her grandmother? But the reflection's voice was relentless. She's the only one who can stop you, Zuri. If you don't act now, you'll lose everything you've gained. Zuri clutched her head, torn between the voice and her own heart. Her grandmother was the only person who had ever truly cared for her. But the reflection had given her so much power. Could she really give it all up now? Think about it, Zuri. Without her in the way, you have no limits, the reflection whispered. Zuri looked at the mirror, tears filling her eyes. She didn't know how much longer she could resist. This is just the beginning of Zuri's inner conflict as her shadow self grows stronger, testing her loyalty to her grandmother and her own morality. The next scenes will continue to build suspense as Zuri's choices become more difficult, leading to a dramatic and emotional climax where she must face the consequences of the reflection's influence. That night, Zuri lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. The reflection's voice echoed over and over, whispering dark promises, filling her with doubt and fear. But every time she thought of her grandmother, she felt the weight of love and guilt. In the middle of the night, Zuri couldn't take it anymore. She tiptoed out of bed and pulled out the mirror from under her floorboard. The reflection appeared instantly, a cold smile on its face. You're ready, aren't you? It asked, its voice soft like a snake's hiss. I don't know, Zuri whispered, her hands trembling. She's my grandmother. I can't hurt her. The reflection's eyes gleamed with anger. If you don't act, she will stop you, Zuri. She knows too much. She'll destroy everything you've worked for. You don't have to love her, just do what needs to be done. Zuri dropped the mirror, unable to bear the pressure. She ran out of the house into the cool night air, breathing heavily. The stars above twinkled as if watching her. Zuri felt lost, trapped between her love for her grandmother and the dangerous promises of power that her reflection offered. That night, as Zuri finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, she had a strange dream. In the dream, she stood in a vast forest, surrounded by tall, dark trees. A figure appeared before her. It was herself, but twisted and cruel, her eyes glowing with the same light as the reflection in the mirror. Look at you, the reflection sneered. You're weak without me. You're nothing. Zuri backed away, her heart pounding. No, that's not true. Oh, but it is, the reflection said, stepping closer. Without me, you'll go back to being the small, forgotten Zuri. But with me, you can rule this village. They will fear you. They will bow to you. Isn't that what you want? Zuri felt herself torn apart. The shadow of her reflection loomed over her, making her feel small and powerless again. But then, a soft voice echoed through the forest. Zuri, the voice called, warm and familiar. Zuri turned and saw her grandmother, Nia, standing at the edge of the forest. You are strong, Zuri, but not because of the mirror. You are strong because of your heart. Zuri reached out toward her grandmother, but the reflection grabbed her wrist, pulling her back. She's lying. You don't need her. Zuri screamed, struggling against the reflection's grip, and suddenly woke up, drenched in sweat. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind, "You are strong because of your heart." The next morning, Zuri couldn't take it anymore. She went to her grandmother, her eyes filled with tears. "Grandma, I have to tell you something." Nia looked up from her cooking, her face kind but serious. "What is it, child?" Zuri took a deep breath and told her everything. About the mirror, the voice, and the reflection that had been controlling her. She expected her grandmother to be angry, but instead, Nia looked sad. "I knew something was wrong," Nia said softly. "The curse of the mirror is real, Zuri. It doesn't just show you your reflection. It shows you your darkest self, the part of you that feeds on fear and anger." Zuri's heart sank. "Grandma, I didn't want this. But now the reflection wants me to hurt you." Nia nodded, her face calm despite the terrible truth. "The mirror thrives on your pain, Zuri. It gives you power, but it's not real. It's the kind of power that destroys, not builds." Zuri's voice cracked. "What do I do, Grandma? How do I stop it?" Nia reached out and took Zuri's hand. "The mirror's power only grows if you let it. You must choose, Zuri. You can either break free from the reflection's control, or you will lose yourself to it forever." That evening, Zuri sat in her room, staring at the mirror. The reflection looked back at her, its eyes glowing with menace. "So, you told her," the reflection said, its voice dripping with contempt. "I warned you." Zuri shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No, you're wrong. She's my grandmother. She loves me." The reflection's face twisted into a snarl. "She's weak. You're stronger without her. Don't you see? I am the real you. Without me, you're nothing." Zuri clenched her fist, her heart pounding. "No. You're not the real me. You're just the part of me that's angry and afraid. But I'm more than that." The reflection's eyes glowed brighter. "You can't fight me, Zuri. You've already let me in. Now you belong to me." Zuri took a deep breath, remembering her grandmother's words. "I won't let you control me anymore." With a surge of strength, Zuri grabbed the mirror. The reflection screamed, its voice filling the room with a terrible sound. But Zuri didn't let go. "You don't control me," she shouted, her voice shaking with determination. Suddenly, the mirror cracked, and the reflection's face twisted in agony. The crack spread across the glass until the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces. As the mirror shattered, Zuri felt the darkness lift from her heart. The voice was gone. The reflection no longer had power over her. She fell to the floor, exhausted but free. Her grandmother rushed into the room and hugged Zuri tightly. "You did it, Zuri. You broke the curse." Zuri buried her face in her grandmother's shoulder, tears of relief flowing freely. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I almost lost myself." Nia stroked Zuri's hair gently. "The important thing is that you found your way back. You are stronger than the darkness, Zuri. Always remember that." Zuri looked around at the shattered pieces of the mirror. She had made her choice, and it wasn't power that came from fear. It was the strength that came from El. The next day, the village of Ekere buzzed with the news that Zuri had broken the curse of the mirror. People whispered about the bravery of the young girl who had faced her darkest self and won. The village elders even came to her house to offer their praise. Zuri, however, wasn't looking for praise. She had learned a valuable lesson. Power wasn't about control or making others afraid of you. True power came from being true to yourself and caring for the people who loved you. As she walked through the village, Kofi approached her with a smile. "I'm glad to see you're back to yourself, Zuri. I knew you had the strength inside you. Zuri smiled back, her heart light. Thanks, Kofi. I'm sorry for how I acted before. Kofi shook his head. It's okay. We all have our struggles. What matters is how we face them. Zuri nodded, knowing he was right. She had faced her darkest fears and come out stronger. And now, she was ready for whatever the future held. Zuri nodded, knowing he was right. She had faced her darkest fears and came out stronger. And now, she was ready for whatever the future held. Days passed, and though the mirror was gone, Zuri still carried the weight of her actions. She couldn't forget the way she had hurt her friends, the harsh words she'd spoken, and how she'd nearly turned on her grandmother. Despite the village's admiration for her bravery, Zuri felt like a stranger in her own skin. At school, Amora avoided her. The other kids, who had once followed her out of fear, now looked at her with uncertainty. Only Kofi seemed unchanged, greeting her with his usual kindness. But Zuri couldn't shake the feeling that she had lost something, trust, perhaps, or maybe a part of herself that would never fully return. One afternoon, she saw Amora sitting alone under the old baobab tree. Taking a deep breath, Zuri approached her. Amora, can I talk to you? Amora glanced up, her eyes guarded. What do you want, Zuri? Zuri's heart ached at the coldness in her voice. I want to apologize. For everything. I wasn't myself, and I took my anger out on you. I'm really sorry. Amora studied her for a moment, then shrugged. You scared me, Zuri. I don't know if I can forget that. I understand, Zuri said, her voice soft. But I hope you can forgive me someday. Amora didn't say anything more, but Zuri felt a small spark of hope. Maybe things wouldn't go back to how they were right away, but she had taken the first step. Not long after, Zuri received an unexpected visit from the village elders. They came to her home, their faces serious but respectful. Her grandmother welcomed them in, offering them seats and cups of fresh water. The oldest of the elders, Elder Malu, spoke first. Zuri, you have done something remarkable. You've broken a curse that has hung over this village for generations. Zuri looked down, feeling uncomfortable under their praise. I didn't do it alone. My grandmother helped me. Elder Malu nodded. Yes, but it was your strength that shattered the mirror. We believe you have a unique connection to the spiritual world, Zuri. And we would like you to use that connection to help protect the village. Zuri blinked in surprise. Protect the village. How? Elder Malu exchanged glances with the other elders before continuing. There are other forces at work beyond the mirror. Darker things that we don't fully understand. We believe that, with training, you could become a protector, someone who can see these forces and stop them before they cause harm. Zuri's heart pounded. The idea of using her abilities to help others was appealing, but it also terrified her. What if she lost control again? What if the darkness inside her was still too strong? I don't know if I can, Zuri said honestly. What if I hurt people again? Elder Malu's gaze softened. Fear is natural, Zuri. But you've already proven that you have the strength to resist the darkness. You won't be alone in this. We will guide you. After the elders left, Zuri sat with her grandmother in silence. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Could she really become the village's protector? She had barely saved herself from the mirror's influence, and now they wanted her to face even greater dangers. Her grandmother placed a hand on her shoulder. What are you thinking, child? Zuri sighed. I'm scared, Grandma. What if I can't do it? What if I let everyone down? Nia smiled gently. You have always been stronger than you know, Zuri. And strength doesn't mean being fearless. It means doing what's right, even when you're afraid. The elders see something in you because they know what I've always known: you have a good heart. Zuri nodded, her grandmother's words bringing a sense of calm to her troubled mind. I want to help, she admitted. I just don't want to become like the reflection again. You won't, Nia said firmly. Because now you know the difference between power and wisdom. You'll make the right choices. With that, Zuri made her decision. She would accept the elders' offer, not because she saw power, but because she wanted to protect her village from the dangers lurking in the shadows. The next day, Zuri met with Elder Malu and the other elders in a quiet grove just outside the village. They sat in a circle around the fire, their faces lit by the flickering flames. Your journey begins here, Elder Malu said. Today, we will teach you how to see beyond what ordinary eyes can perceive. There are spirits in this world, both good and bad, and you must learn to recognize them. Zuri listened intently as they explained the basics of spiritual awareness. They taught her how to focus her mind, how to sense the energy around her, and how to protect herself from harmful forces. At first, it was overwhelming. Zuri struggled to feel anything beyond her own nervousness. But with time, she began to notice subtle changes in the air, the way the wind seemed to shift, the way certain places felt warmer or colder without explanation. You are learning quickly, Elder Malu observed one evening after a particularly intense lesson. But remember, the greatest power you possess is not in your abilities, it's in your heart. Never forget that, Zuri. Weeks passed, and Zuri's training continued. She learned how to sense danger, how to connect with the spirits of the land, and how to protect herself using rituals passed down through generations. But one evening, as she walked home through the forest, she felt something strange. The air was heavy, and the trees seemed to whisper in a language she couldn't understand. A chill ran down her spine. Suddenly, she heard a voice, low and menacing, like the hiss of a snake. You cannot hide from me, Zuri. Zuri froze. The voice sounded familiar, but it wasn't the reflection from the mirror. This was something darker, something older. You may have broken the mirror, the voice continued, but I am still here. I will always be here. Zuri's heart raced. She looked around, but saw nothing. The forest was empty, save for the shadows between the trees. She took a deep breath, remembering her training. Asterisk, stay calm. Focus on the energy around you, asterisk. Slowly, the fear began to fade, replaced by a steady resolve. Whatever this presence was, it couldn't control her, not anymore. You don't scare me, Zuri whispered into the night. When Zuri told the elders about the voice in the forest, they exchanged worried glances. It is as we feared, Elder Malu said gravely. There is a dark spirit in the forest, older than the curse of the mirror. It has been growing stronger, feeding on the fear and anger in the village. Zuri's heart sank. What can we do? Elder Malu looked at her with solemn eyes. You are the only one who can face it, Zuri. You are connected to the spirit world in a way that none of us are. But you must be careful. This spirit will try to use your fears against you, just as the reflection did. Zuri swallowed hard, fear creeping back into her mind. But she knew she couldn't back down now. The village was counting on her. I'll do it, she said, her voice steady. I'll face the spirit. Zuri's mind raced as she prepared herself for the task ahead. She spent every moment learning from the elders, meditating, and practicing her newfound abilities. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her, but the memory of the voice in the forest fueled her determination. Her grandmother, Nia, watched her closely, offering quiet encouragement. You are stronger than this spirit, Zuri, she would remind the village, though unaware of the full danger lurking in the forest, since something was wrong. The air had grown thick with tension, and whispers of bad omens spread through Ekere. Every night, strange sounds echoed from the forest, low groans and eerie whispers, as if the trees themselves were in pain. Ah! It has fed on fear for centuries, but it cannot stand against love and courage. One evening, as Zuri sat by the fire, Kofi came to visit her. "Are you really going to face the spirit?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Zuri nodded. "I have to. If I don't stop it, it will keep growing stronger. I can't let that happen." Kofi sat beside her, staring into the flames. "I believe in you, Zuri. You've already proven you're stronger than anything that tries to control you." Zuri smiled at his words, but deep inside, doubt still lingered. Could she really face something so powerful? What if she wasn't ready? The night before the confrontation, the skies darkened, and the wind howled through the village like a warning. Zuri stood at the edge of the forest, staring into the deep shadows between the trees. The air was thick with tension, and she could feel the dark spirit's presence growing stronger. Elder Malu approached her, his face grim but resolute. "Tomorrow, you will enter the heart of the forest. That is where the spirit's power is strongest. Remember everything we've taught you, Zuri. You must remain calm, no matter what it shows you." Zuri nodded, though her heart pounded with fear. She had faced the reflection, but this felt different. The spirit in the forest was older, more dangerous, and it had been waiting for someone like her, someone who could see beyond the physical world. That night, Zuri barely slept. Her dreams were filled with shadows and whispers, the dark spirit's voice taunting her, reminding her of her fears and weaknesses. When she woke, the sky was still grey, and the village was silent, as if holding its breath. At dawn, Zuri gathered what little she needed, nothing but her courage and the wisdom of the elders. Her grandmother gave her one final embrace. "Stay true to yourself, Zuri. No matter what happens, remember that your heart is your greatest strength." With those words echoing in her mind, Zuri entered the forest. The trees loomed tall and dark around her, their branches twisted like the hands of old spirits. The deeper she went, the colder the air became. The sunlight struggled to reach her, as if the forest itself was trying to swallow her whole. Zuri could feel the spirit's presence growing closer, a heavy pressure in the air that made it hard to breathe. The whispers started again, low at first, then louder, surrounding her like a dark cloud. "You don't belong here, Zuri," the spirit hissed. "You are just a frightened girl, lost in the shadows. Turn back before it's too late." Zuri clenched her fist, forcing herself to stay calm. "I'm not afraid of you." But the spirit's voice only grew stronger, filling her mind with doubt. "You'd be. I know your fears, Zuri. I know the darkness inside you. You cannot escape it." Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet trembled, and the trees around her seemed to close in. Zuri stumbled but caught herself just as a figure appeared in the shadows ahead. It was her reflection, but not like before. This time, it was taller, darker, and twisted, its eyes glowing with a cold, menacing light. The spirit had taken on her form, but it was a version of herself that terrified her, a version filled with anger, fear, and darkness. "I am the real you," the spirit whispered, its voice a horrible echo of her own. "You cannot fight me. You are me." Zuri's heart raced. She had faced this darkness before, but seeing it in front of her, giving shape and form, made it all the more terrifying. She could feel the pull of the spirit, trying to drag her into the same despair that had nearly consumed her when she'd been under the mirror's curse. But this time, she was prepared. "I am not you," Zuri said, her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. "You are just the part of me that I've already defeated. You have no power over me anymore." The spirit's eyes flared with anger. "You cannot win. You will never be free of me." But Zuri stood her ground. She remembered the lessons of the elders, the strength of her grandmother's love, and the courage she had found within herself. Slowly, she raised her hands, palms out, focusing on the energy of the earth, the trees, the wind, all the forces of nature that had watched over her for so long. "You're wrong," she said, her voice firm. "I will always have power over you." The spirit screamed, its voice filling the forest with a terrible noise. The ground shook, and the trees groaned, but Zuri didn't flinch. She closed her eyes, focusing on the light within her heart, pushing the darkness away. The spirit lunged at her, but Zuri stood firm, her mind focused on the strength she had been taught to wield. The dark figure seemed to flicker as if it was losing its form, but its eyes still burned with hatred. "Zuri," it screamed, its voice now more of a wail. "You cannot escape me. You are weak, powerless without me." Zuri breathed deeply, feeling the energy flow through her. She remembered her grandmother's words, "You are strong because of your heart star." She wasn't powerless. She had love, wisdom, and the strength of her ancestors behind her. "I am not powerless," Zuri whispered. "And I don't need you." With a fierce burst of light from deep inside her, Zuri thrust her hands forward, sending a wave of pure energy at the spirit. The forest around her glowed as the light cut through the darkness. The spirit screamed again, its body dissolving into a dark mist, swirling in agony. "I am stronger than my fears," Zuri shouted, pushing harder. "I choose love, not darkness." The spirit shrieked, then exploded into a cloud of black smoke. The shadows that had surrounded Zuri vanished, and the forest suddenly grew quiet. The trees stood still, the air warm once again, and the sun broke through the canopy, casting golden light across the forest floor. Zuri collapsed to her knees, exhausted but victorious. She had faced the spirit of darkness and won. When Zuri returned to the village, she was greeted with silence. The villagers had been waiting anxiously, wondering if she had succeeded or fallen to the dark spirit. But as she stepped into the village square, her face filled with peace, they knew she had triumphed. Her grandmother rushed to her side, wrapping her in a tight embrace. "You did it, Zuri," Nia whispered, tears of joy in her eyes. "You faced the darkness, and you came back stronger." Zuri smiled, her heart light. She had been through so much, but now she felt free, truly free. The darkness no longer held any power over her. The elders approached her, their faces filled with respect. "You have done more than we could have ever imagined," Elder Malu said. "The village is safe, thanks to you." Zuri nodded, but she didn't need their praise. She had learned something far more important, that her strength didn't come from the mirror or her abilities. It came from her heart, her love for her family and friends, and the courage to face her own fears. As the village celebrated Zuri's victory, she stood at the edge of the crowd, watching the joy and relief on everyone's faces. Kofi came up to her, his eyes shining with pride. "I knew you could do it, Zuri. You're a hero." Zuri shook her head. "I'm not a hero, Kofi. I just did what I had to do." Kofi smiled. "That's what makes you a hero." Zuri laughed, but her heart felt full. She had faced her darkest self and come out stronger, but she knew the journey wasn't over. There would always be challenges, always fears to overcome. But now she knew she had the strength to face them. In the days that followed, Zuri felt a new sense of peace. The village had returned to its normal rhythm, and the dark presence in the forest had vanished. The elders continued to teach her, but now, Zuri no longer feared the power inside her. She understood it, respected it, and used it wisely. Her friendship with Amora slowly mended, and the village children no longer looked at her with fear. She had become a symbol of strength and hope, not because she was powerful, but because she had shown them all that courage and love could conquer even the darkest of forces. Thank you for watching Zuri's reflection. We hope you enjoyed this thrilling and emotional journey. What lessons did you learn from Zuri's story? Leave a comment below to share your thoughts. If you liked the story, be sure to hit the like button and share it with your friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more exciting and suspenseful stories. Stay tuned for our next video, it's going to be just as thrilling. See you next time. Bye.